Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is, simply put, the greatest anime of all time. Now, that is undoubtedly an opinion many will disagree with, seeing as how protective fans can be over what they consider to be the greatest anime, or the greatest anything. Still, I'm here to tell you that your subjective opinion is wrong, and mine is correct. The greatest anime of all time is not Naruto, it's not One Piece, it's not Death Note, Dragon Ball, or Bleach. It's not Avatar The Last Airbender, because technically that's not an anime, it is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Or maybe it's Cowboy Bebop, I don't know. Unfortunately, I lack conviction when it comes to ranking my favorite things. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Nerd Soup. I am Beau Oliver, and on today's video, I will be looking back on one of the most influential and beloved animes of all time. You already know, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, the sequel to 2003's Fullmetal Alchemist. More specifically, I'll be focusing on how Brotherhood develops the theme of power, both individually and collectively, and the subsequent limitations of that power when it's pit up against the potential of humanity. The most impressive part of Hiromu Arakawa's masterpiece is how effortlessly she balances her sprawling narrative's many philosophical and political aspects without ever overwhelming the viewer. As many of you well know, Brotherhood is packed with conspiracy theories spanning multiple characters and storylines that all work to develop the narrative's main theme, a theme which can also be found in the hit song Many Men by American rapper 50 Cent. That every lesson learned in life is learned through pain, the law of equivalent exchange, the give and the take between giving something up in order to build something new. Understanding this concept leaves every character in Fullmetal Alchemist with a newfound appreciation for what it means to be human by the story's end. Essentially, Sunny Days wouldn't be special if it wasn't for rain, and boy does it rain on the parades of these characters, especially main characters and brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric. Over the years, we've witnessed our fair share of shonen protagonists who are chock full of potential and drive, characters who start as rookies and then strive to become the best possible versions of themselves. But Brotherhood takes the opposite approach. We are introduced to Edward and Alphonse Elric as child prodigies, two teenagers equipped with the incredible power of alchemy who then become state-sanctioned soldiers in the heavily militarized country of Amestris. Essentially, they are children on top of society's food chain, afforded immense power due to their prodigal abilities. Yet the young brothers gradually descend into a pit of political chaos, where they are brutally confronted with the limitations of these incredible powers. So instead of mastering their abilities and increasing the limits of their power, the Elric brothers must learn to live with the fact that, although they are powerful, alchemy cannot be used to solve all their problems. On the contrary, alchemy creates far more problems than it solves, and underneath all the badass heroics and epic fight scenes, the power of alchemy is primarily used by Arakawa to grapple with several philosophical ideas and themes woven seamlessly into a main narrative that never betrays the conviction of its main characters. In the end, all these elements come together to illuminate the limitations of personal power while also shining a light on the never-ending potential of human beings, an idea beautifully summarized in the show's final moments.
その痛みに耐え、乗り越えたとき、人は何者にも負けない強靭な心を手に入れる。そう、鋼のような心。
Even when faced with numerous atrocities caused by alchemy, the young brothers never give up on its potential for good. They essentially have alchemy to blame for everything they've lost, their father, their mother, their entire family, and even their bodies. But they still believe that alchemy can be used as a tool to build a better world for everyone, not just a chosen few. Most importantly, their faith in alchemy grows stronger due to their growing faith in humanity's capacity for goodness, a belief which is cultivated throughout their many experiences with the good and bad sides of the world. And alchemy. Edward's growth as a character comes at the expense of the show's main antagonist, Father, a supernatural being determined to become an all-powerful being, essentially a god, incapable of human error or mistake. Like many authoritative figures throughout history, Father's idea of being human is centered around being perfect, something no average person could ever achieve, regardless of how much power they obtain. But Father believes true perfection is within his grasp. It is why, over the course of 400 years, he has sacrificed the lives of millions to create alchemic amplifiers, otherwise known in the show as Philosopher's Stones. The mere presence of the Philosopher's Stones and the horrifying reality of how they are made speak to the atrocities governments are willing to commit against their own to acquire what they believe to be absolute power. The stones are symbolic representations of the power obtained from empires built on the backs of the people whose lives were transformed and forged together for the sole purpose of amplifying the state, and ultimately, one insane individual. I mean, that's part of the show's true genius, right? You're 15 episodes in, and it hits you. All of your favorite characters that you've come to know and love are metaphorical stand-ins for Nazis, and the country they fight for is essentially the Third Reich. Like, all of these fucking characters are going to hell. They're all war criminals. Fuhrer Bradley, obviously a stand-in for Hitler, but he's not the only one with a one-way ticket to Dante's Inferno. Mustang, Hawkeye, Marco, McDougal, Maria, Hughes. Hate to break it to you, girls. Daddy is not in the good place. Or maybe he is, depending on if you've seen that show. The only one who has a realistic shot at seeing paradise is Armstrong. Long before the adventures of the Elric brothers and their allies, Father manipulated their father, a former enslaved man known as Van Hohenheim, into helping him destroy his home country of Xerxes, so that Father may escape his flask and obtain a physical form that mirrors a human body. Yet ever since the destruction of Xerxes, Father has strived towards something beyond mere human, or homunculi, something that can only be interpreted as God, or a god wannabe. Real-life dictators often project the image of them being gods into the eyes of their people to solidify their positions. But these men, as ambitious as they were ultimately held back by their humanity, or, more specifically, their mortality. On the other hand, Father is tapped into the power of alchemy, so he very wrongly believes there are no physical limitations to his potential. After spending hundreds of years gobbling up neighboring countries, Amestris is finally ready to be sacrificed, all in the name of creating a god from man. Or from homunculi. All this by using the power of the world's strongest philosopher's stone, the country. Unlike Edward, Father never accepts the law of equivalent exchange for what it truly is. Father cannot understand the concept of giving something up because he has nothing left to give in the end. He only has the souls of those he has taken away without ever giving up anything in return. The only thing cultivated by Father throughout his life was a power too great to control by man or homunculi. Therefore, this power was never truly his, so he has nothing to give back when confronted by the show's real version of God in the end. Like Father, Edward is also confronted by this symbolic representation of a higher power, and happily agrees to forfeit his alchemic powers. Unlike Father, Edward did indeed have something of value to give back for his bodies, the power of alchemy that he earned, not stole. Thus, Edward fulfills the law of equivalent exchange and returns home with his and his brother's bodies. But more important than Edward having something to give up is the young hero having something to live for after this battle is over. The relationships cultivated by the Elric brothers throughout their lives and during their time as alchemists are far more important than Edward's individual abilities. In the end, he concedes the limitations of his own power with the realization that the true power of alchemy goes far beyond any individual user. Edward puts his faith in the power of humanity as a collective, choosing to forge bonds of community rather than focusing on the individual. In contrast, Father puts his faith entirely in himself, believing that sacrificing humanity as a whole will create the perfect individual. But in the end, no one man can control the collective power of humanity, as we see Father literally come apart at the seams when he tries. But two men, or in this case two brothers, can fight to help people see the potential in their shared beliefs, ideas, cultures, and customs. It's exactly why Edward and Alphonse set off to study the different alchemies of the world in order to improve the lives of others, with alchemy. The series is packed with moments of moral reasoning from the Elric brothers and their allies, key moments that help them realize the potential of alchemy to help those they care about most, something that goes a long way in alleviating the minds of some of the more unpredictable characters in the show. I'm always fascinated by the reoccurring idea in anime of children being able to balance the black and white of a complicated world into a meditative gray that provides a clearer perspective for all those living in it. The Elric brothers end the series with an optimistic view on improving the lives of every person around the world, but coming to this shared conclusion was only possible through their shared understanding of how limited the power of alchemy truly is. Take for example the moment where Edward, assisted by Hawkeye, manages to stop Roy Mustang from murdering the homunculi Envy, an act of violence that would have left the Colonel consumed by feelings of vengeance and rage, totally shattering his image as a righteous soldier. Mustang has the ability to incinerate even the most powerful of homunculi when using his flame alchemy. Still, burning Envy alive won't bring back his best friend, and at this moment in time, it will do nothing to help them win their war. It will only make Mustang more similar to Father, Fuhrer Bradley, and all those he fights against. In this moment, Mustang was able to confront the limitations of his alchemic power without succumbing to the temptation of pushing this power to its absolute limits. He realizes that killing Envy will not quench his thirst for vengeance, but that it will only make him more of a slave to his vengeful bloodlust. The best way to honor the legacy of his friend is to show mercy to their enemies, something most of their enemies are incapable of doing for them. Mustang displays a respect for life in a way that Father never could, or that Scar never did before his experiences in Amestris. The classic villain-turned-hero has never been written better than in the case of Scar. He is a character cursed with an uncontrollable and all-consuming sense of vengeance due to past sufferings caused by alchemy. He views alchemy as a plague on the world, a power with the sole purpose of creating death and destruction. So he never uses alchemy to forge any weapons or tools. He takes a personal vow to only use alchemy to destroy, and more specifically, use alchemy to destroy every alchemist still living in the world. It isn't until the 2 confrontations Scar has with Winry Rockbell, the young mechanic who assists the Elric brothers throughout their journey, that he begins to see the potential in using alchemy to help people. Additionally, he begins to see past his own trauma by understanding the truth. He wasn't the only one who's lost everything to the power of alchemy. In their first confrontation, Scar is spared by Winry after she is successfully talked down by Edward. She forgoes the chance to avenge her dead parents, and their second confrontation finds her forgiving Scar altogether. So here is Scar, a man who has murdered innocent doctors, spared and then saved by the young daughter those innocent parents left behind. Up until this point, Scar only uses alchemy to destroy and give death to his enemies, palming the face of his victims before violently killing them. Yet here he is gifted a second chance by a girl who quite literally only uses her hands to build and give life. This second chance given to Scar effectively frees him from the cycle of violence he could not escape on his own. Just like the Elric brothers being unable to bring back their mom, Scar was confronted with the limitations of alchemy when his older brother could not save their home country Ishval during the Amestris invasion. And like the Elric brothers, he loses the only family he had left. Though Scar's brother left behind the secrets of his alchemy in the most horrifying way imaginable, this knowledge proves triumphant in their fight against the monsters who destroyed Scar's home. But it is not his brother's alchemy individually that saves them. It's the collective effort between different people of different nations and the individual alchemies they wield. In his fight against Führer Bradley, Scar forsakes his vow and uses alchemy to create, which ultimately makes the difference in his victory. He regains his humanity by seeing the potential for good and using alchemy to build weapons, build trust, build relationships, and even rebuild a nation by joining forces with those who were once his sworn enemies. On the other hand, Father never gave himself the chance to reach these same conclusions as Scar or Mustang, or Edward, characters who fought to regain and maintain their humanity, and won. Father lost this fight the moment he decided to forsake his humanity entirely, by splitting his personality into 7 different homunculi, each one of them metaphorically representing the different aspects of a person's personality, or the 7 deadly sins. Father becomes a shell of his former self, essentially a lifeless avatar with no feelings or ambitions besides power. The dwarf in the flask was so desperate to escape his imprisonment by becoming human, but in the end, he never gave humanity a genuine chance. Instead, he becomes numb to everything he perceives as human flaws, manifesting these flaws into living creatures that he calls children. And the dysfunction between these characters is like the Succession family, on steroids. You can't help but feel sorry for the homunculi, lost souls who were manipulated by their father to only feel contempt for humanity, never given a chance to find peace and solace in their own existence as creatures born from humanity's sacrifice. Instead, it leaves them utterly lost and confused in their final moments as to what their purpose in life actually was. A cruel and terrifying way to spend your last few seconds alive. All of Father's children experience a cold and bitter ending to their existence as homunculi, except for Greed, the black sheep of his immediate family. Though Greed's death is one of the saddest moments of the entire series, it could also be considered the strongest and most emotionally satisfying ending for any character in the show. What truly helps Greed find peace in his final moments is his acceptance of himself as the greediest man in the world. And the one thing he truly craves, deep down in his greedy little heart, is companionship. And in the end, that's exactly what he got from the Elric brothers and their allies. They fulfill his avarice by giving him the one thing he always wanted and never realized he already had until it was too late: a family. And though Greed's evolving band of misfits throughout the show weren't perfect, what family is, it is far better than the family Greed once had. Similar to the infamous TV dads of old and new, Father made a fatal mistake in his pursuit of absolute power when he decided to alienate his children, leaving him without anyone to share in the burden of being mortal. Unlike Edward, Mustang, and Scar, characters who dedicate their lives to those who mean the most to them, Father had nothing to live for in the end besides himself and his own lust for power. Maybe if he was willing to share in the spotlight, Father and his children could have ruled over the world as a family of Mussolinis. But then again, when have we ever known a madman to be generous with absolute power? I could go on and on about Hiromu Arakawa's masterpiece, one of the smartest, most creative, and consistently exciting fantasy series ever put to screen. I would still argue it's the best. But I've rewritten this video essay maybe 78 times at this point, so I'm just gonna stop it here before I think of something new to say or think of a correction I want to make or chop it all up and start from the beginning. So, yeah. Oh, and to everyone who couldn't resist commenting and correcting my intentional mistake of calling Brotherhood a sequel to the 2003 series, thank you for the engagement. It means so much to me and everyone here at Nerd Soup and our patrons, so let's thank them, because the only thing more important to me than engagement is the people who pledge to our Patreon page.